Ah, Team Fortress 2. What a wonderful game that I played once in 2014, and literally never again because I suck at first-person shooters. But I still like TF2 because god damn it, those Meet the Team videos were great. And the comics! Amazing, incredibly funny, and occasionally really well written. I read them when I was a sophomore in high school and, no joke, refreshed the page daily because I was waiting for new comics. I haven't checked in years, so I bet the series is done now and... Where the fuck is Comic 7, Valve? Anyway, I recently reread the comics and was reminded of an odd line. In issue 2, Pauline says that nearly half of the mercs can't read. This idea is repeated in the contract, where Saxton Hale says he's fairly certain 4 of them can't read. So, that raises the question, which 4? Naturally, I reread every comic, watched every animated short, and reviewed all of the taunts to be sure. And the answer is... complicated. I'll go through the mercs, ranking them by most likely to be literate to least likely. The engineer can read. According to his trading card, he has 11 PhDs, meaning he wrote 11 different theses. Theses? Whatever, the point is he's highly educated, and that would be hard to be if he could not read. But if you need official evidence, he reads his grandfather's blueprints in loose cannon, and he reads A Christmas Book and The Alien Letter in true meaning. If anyone can read, it's the engineer. The medic can read. He had his medical license revoked, which means he had a medical license in the first place, which means he went to med school. Although, I guess he could have sold his soul for a doctoring license? But that leads me to the big example of him reading. Medic reads the contract for his soul in The Naked and the Dead. He also reads a medical report in A Cold Day in Hell. What's more, the medic clearly labels things. He labels his organs in Meet the Medic, and in the same video, his medigun, which he created, which is only used by him, is shown with a glowing indicator saying Uber Charge Ready. He also writes equations on a blackboard in The Sound of Medicine, and either him or Engie wrote on the blackboard in Medic's lab an expiration date, and either him or Engie labeled the bread monster as specimen in the same short. Most of Spy's reading comes from the short expiration date. In this video, he asks everyone to write down their last wishes. Only Scout does so, more on that later, but the fact that Spy was ready to read the wishes means he can read. Although, to be fair, the only word we see him read is Scout's name. Also in expiration date, Spy's smoke room is filled with books. Plus, he writes on the blackboard multiple times. Finally, in the comic Blood Money, he's seen carrying a book labeled How to Beat a DNA Test. Spy can read. Ah, Heavy. He's the big dumb tough guy. He admits people can outsmart him. Surely he's illiterate, right? Heavy has a PhD in Russian literature. Seriously, according to a line of dialogue in Poker Night at the Inventory, Heavy received a doctorate from the Soviet College of Mines, Farms, and Science. And I mean, Poker Night is questionably canon, but Heavy isn't really ever portrayed as dumb. He speaks simply because English isn't his first language, but he is usually portrayed as being fairly intelligent in the comics. Also, Pauline sent him a letter in issue 2, which he reads, which means that Miss Pauline definitely knows that Heavy can read. Sniper is an edge case. He doesn't read much, but there isn't any indication he can't read. He reads a Girardi ad in the Girardi comic, he crosses names off a list in his Most Wanted taunt, and that's about it. I mean, he found out that he was adopted in Blood in the Water without being told, possibly from reading, but it isn't explicitly said that's how he found out. Let's put him in the maybe tier. Demo Man is another maybe. Like Heavy, Demo is smarter than he looks. He's portrayed as being moderately intelligent when he's sober. The problem is he's never sober. There's a ton of scenes where he looks like he's reading, but isn't necessarily doing so. He might read Pauline's paper that says assemble the team, or he figures it out because Pauline is assembling the team. He might know Scout and Spy are in trouble from the headline saying they're about to be hanged, or he just saw the mugshots. He might know that the hanging is about to happen because of the banner, or because he saw a woman selling dolls of mercenary corpses. There is, however, one scene that points to Demo Man being able to read. In the Bomb-Onicon comic, he tries to read the titular book. He doesn't, but he tries to, which means he can probably read. Soldier can read. That sounds wrong, right? Like, if anyone can't read, it's Soldier. 'Cause he's dumb. so incredibly dumb. But then again, I've met plenty of stupid people who are illiterate. Illiteracy is more a sign of poor education than inability to think. And Soldier can definitely read. He writes his name on a piece of paper and expiration date, writes "No solicitors" on his door in war, he owns a pile of Guns and Haircuts magazines in the same comic, and he wrote "These are my heads, don't take my heads" in Meet the Director. He misspells heads, meaning he isn't good at reading, but he is literate. He also has a character sheet when playing D&D in Gargoyles and Gravel, as do Heavy and Scout. He might have figured out the honey in Amelia Earhart's plane was honey by reading the label, but on the other hand, he could have done that via smell. Also, he's a lawyer, and yes, Merasmus is responsible for that, but Soldier published an ad in the newspaper and read Zephaniah Mann's will in Grave Matters. The most interesting scene of Soldier reading comes from A Cold Day in Hell. Soldier begins to read the Sears tag on a coat, then stops after reading the S, because that could stand for Stalin, or Soviet, or socialism. He also looks directly at his own coat's Made in China tag and somehow doesn't read it. This shows that while Soldier can read, he often doesn't, because what if he reads some of that dastardly propaganda? It also shows that Soldier doesn't read words as words. He pieces them together one letter at a time. Soldier seems to have a reading disorder, made worse by him being cartoonishly hyper-nationalist. But still, he can technically read. Scout, similar to Soldier, has trouble reading. He can read, though. He goes through a pile of law books in Unhappy Returns, and a pile of dating books in Expiration Date. Although, considering the fact that you can see one of those law books is a script book written for young readers, it's questionable if he can read at an adult level. He also definitely didn't read all those books in Expiration Date. There are dozens of thick books, and he apparently read them in a few hours. I call bull. He also reads a comic during his home runner's taunt, but you know, comics have pictures. He says he wrote out a wish in Expiration Date, although we do not see it. We do see him write his name in that short, however, as well as a speech balloon that says blah blah boom. In addition, he sets up a pair of signs saying single moms and everyone else in a Smith story. He also knows that the plane in A Cold Day in Hell belongs to Amelia Earhart, and that the button in Expiration Date is related to the briefcase, implying but not necessarily saying he read those signs. That said, Scout isn't great at reading. In The Naked and the Dead, Scout struggles to read the word submachine gun. Later, it's pointed out that his sex bomb tattoo isn't spelled correctly, something that surprises him. Scout can read, he just can't read very well. Pyro definitely cannot read. In Ring of Fire, we see him reading a newspaper, meaning he can read, right? Wrong! From Pyro's perspective, the newspaper is completely blank. Pyro's visual hallucinations keep him from reading. To be fair, Pyro reads a comic and Meet the Medic in Expiration Date, but Ring of Fire shows that he likes to hold up blank pieces of paper. In True Meaning, Engineer asks if Pyro has been writing letters to other dimensions, but Pyro says no. All that means is that Engineer thinks Pyro can read, not that he can. Pyro is never once shown reading something and understanding it. Plus, in Unhappy Returns, Pyro burns a massive pile of books. Pyro is not only incapable of reading, he hates it. So, how many TF2 mercs can't read? 1, and not due to stupidity, but rather due to a mental illness. But what about the statement that 4 can't read? Well, who said that 4 of them can't read? Miss Pauline said almost half while talking about the 4 being hanged. She didn't mean the whole team. She most likely meant Soldier and Scout, both of whom can read, mind you, but it is understandable for her to assume those 2 can't. Besides, it's not like Pauline knows everything. Saxton Hale says he's pretty sure 4 can't read, but he barely knows the team. Why should we take his word for it? He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. So, in conclusion, where the fuck is Comic 7, Valve? That's all I want! Screw the heavy update! Give me closure on Helen's revenge!